Welcome to this special event brought to you by the Wheeler Centre. My name's Peter Mayers. I present the National Interest on ABC Radio National, and it's a great honour and a great pleasure to be sharing a stage with Ingrid Betancourt, French Colombian politician, anti-corruption crusader, environmentalist and survivor. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
In 2002, when campaigning to become President of Colombia as leader of the Green Oxygen Party, Ingrid Betancourt was kidnapped by the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC. For more than 6 years, she was held captive in basic and brutal conditions in the Colombian jungle. Much of that time chained at the neck. Ingrid has written about her experiences in a harrowing, passionate and gripping memoir, Even Silence Has an End. Ingrid, 6.5 years is a long time. Do you still wake up and wonder where you are? Wonder if you're back in the jungle?
Well, it happens a lot, actually, to just open my eyes and just have this second of, I'm here. No, yeah, that still happened. Less than before.
So just the other day you had this?
Yes, here I had it. And especially I think that when you're traveling and that you wake up in,
strange
a hotel, in a
yeah.
bedroom that doesn't mean anything to you in your, it's new. So you have that kind of little...
And in your dreams?
In my dreams, I'm getting better and better. I had many nightmares during the first 2 years after my release, but I think that now it's better. Let's
go back a bit and describe who you are. You were born in Colombia but raised in France. In 1989 you went back to Colombia to pursue a career in politics. Now, what led you to get involved in Colombian politics? It's not a path many people would sort of volunteer for.
I think it was the love for my country. I was brought up in a family that was concerned with what was happening in Colombia. My father had worked all his life in giving tools to common people that wouldn't have the financial means to study, to be able to study abroad, and he created an institution for them to have loans and credits to study abroad. So it was something that he was always thinking about, how to make people, live up to their dreams. And my mother, she was 18 when she founded a shelter for abandoned children. It was before she met my father. And I think it was a couple that had that in common. They wanted to have a Colombia that would be a better place to live. So we were brought up in this frame of mind. And I think that what triggered everything is that when I was living in France and I was married with the father of my children, which is a French man, my mother was in Colombia and she was campaigning for this presidential candidate. And this was an extraordinary man, Luis Carlos Galán. It was a guy with ideals, and in a country like Colombia, which is dominated by violence, corruption, mafia values, drug cartels, etc. And he was killed, but the way he was killed was something that became personal, because he had to address during his presidential campaign Colombians in the outskirts of Bogota. There was this huge gathering, and he had to come to a stage like this, and there were some stairs to just come and talk to the people, and my mother was just behind him, and she was wearing high heels, and when she tried to climb the stairs, she fell down because of her high heels, and in the precise moment she fell down, the snipers that were, of course, of the mafia that killed Luis Carlos Galán just browsed the stage with fire, and she was saved miraculously. So, you know, that made an impact in me, in the sense that I thought, I should be there. I mean, what I'm doing here should be where they're struggling.
A lot of people would have the exact opposite response. They'd say, here you have, you know, a politician who's willing to stand up against corruption and the mafia and the drugs in Colombia, and look what happens to him. But you went back and you initially ran for Parliament, and I think you made a point of running a clean campaign that is not one based on money politics.
Yeah,
right?
It was a huge challenge. And I had to be creative. So I did something that my father hated, which was giving condoms in the street. Of course, but it was kind of, you know, limit. But the idea was to say to people, look, the same way we have to protect ourselves against AIDS, which is, you know, it's a battle, we have to protect ourselves against corruption. And so we have to be responsible. And if you vote for me, it's like wearing a condom. I mean, at least it made people laugh. That was the
condoms against corruption. I like it. So you were elected to the House of Representatives and then to the Senate.
Yes.
And the Senate, I think, with more votes than any other candidate in that election. And your party was called the Green Oxygen Party. It's a strange name. What is
well,
the name?
Not strange when you're in Colombia and you're in politics and you cannot breathe because it's so. I mean, it stinks. Really, I mean, it was difficult to be in that period in Colombia. We had a huge scandal with the president that had been elected receiving financing by the drug cartels. And the whole parliament was, of course, there were exceptions. Whenever I say this, I hear my bell ringing. Not everybody, no, not everybody. But let's say that the system allowed for those kind of friendship with illegal or
it sort of
corrupt or
fostered those alliances.
Yes, those
between
alliances.
The drug money, the mafia,
exactly.
And politicians. Yeah. And from the Senate, you ran for president. How did you end up? You were taken hostage on the 23rd of February 2002. You went on a trip to a place called San Vicente, which is in FARC-controlled territory, or at least disputed territory, I guess.
No, it wasn't really that. I mean, this was the place where the peace talks had been held with the FARC. I mean, the FARC and the government was sitting at a table, and the government I think to grant like a security area to the FARC in order for them to feel at ease negotiating with the government, gave the FARC this whole territory, and it was big. It was the size of Switzerland, and in that zone that it was called the Demilitarized Zone. The army was not allowed to enter, the police either, and it was under the control of the FARC while they were discussing in order to feel that they could be safe. But 2 days prior to my trip, the peace process ended abruptly. And of course, the president at that time was under lots of pressure because people were saying in Colombia that he had given too much to the FARC, and that it was going to be a problem now that the peace talks had ended to recover the control over the zone. So he had granted 48 hours to the FARC to just evict the zone. And this had been done by launching a huge military operation called Thanatos, where, I mean, they had to go or they had to go. I mean, and when I arrived to Florencia, which was the place in that zone where I had to take the road to go to San Vicente in car, well, there was soldiers everywhere. It was a huge, huge military presence. And that same day, at that same place, the president decided to go to held a press conference in order to just prove to Colombian people and to the world, because it was international press with lots of journalists, to prove that it was so safe and it was under control, that he had recovered the control of the zone, that he himself was going to San Vicente. I don't know what happened, but everything went wrong. And probably because he thought that it was in the opposition and he didn't want to have the noise of that voice, or for whatever reason. I really don't know. But the fact is that when I was going to just take, all there was this kind of security plan that we had organized in order for me to go from Florencia to San Vicente. He gave the order to my escorts not to come with me.
So he basically withdrew your security detail.
He withdrew my security. So here I was with my committee, and I had this phone call from the mayor of San Vicente saying, Ingrid, please, you have to come. This is a very difficult moment for us. And he was a Green Party member.
He was one of your party, and you wanted to support him.
And I wanted to support him. So I thought, I have to be there. And then the other thing that really, pushed me to go was that I thought, if I just accept that every time the government will want me not to go somewhere, he will withdraw my security and then I won't go, the government will be controlling my campaign.
So you had to make a stand. You felt you had to take a stand.
Yeah. And I took the road. And that day, there was a military checkpoint. And in that military checkpoint, they checked our identity and they led us through. And this is an important detail because afterwards, and once I was captured, the government of Colombia probably, fearing that this could backfire on them in the sense that people would say they withdrew the security, so they are responsible for the abduction. They just rewrote the story. The fact is that we went through this checkpoint like everybody else. It was not like if it was closed and then they granted a special permission to us to go. No, everybody was going through this checkpoint. There were militaries all over the place, soldiers, Black Hawks, helicopters flying on top of us. They were doing the shuttle between Florencia and San Vicente. Every 30 minutes there was a Black Hawk, leaving for San Vicente. Well, it was really, the appearance of everything that the zone was very secure, like never before. And I had been in that zone many, many times. So I think that nobody could foresee that the FARC would be as audacious as to install a roadblock there. And they did. And that's how I just fall in the trap. Now, the incredible thing I remember that day is that when I saw the guys, because there were so many troops all over the place, it was difficult for me to know if they were soldiers or who they were. So I looked at the boots because they had told me that the difference, they all had the same kind of
camouflage jungle uniform.
Exactly. Yeah. So they said the only way you will recognize them is that the soldiers have leather boots, and the guerrillas and paramilitaries, they have rubber boots.
So when you saw the boots, you knew you were in trouble.
I was in problem, yeah.
And what did you think at first? As you say, you'd been involved in peace negotiations with the FARC. You knew some of their leaders. Did you think, we'll be able to sort this out at first?
I thought it was a mistake. I had been talking with these guys 2 weeks before in this table of negotiation with all the other presidential candidates. And I had all the high members of the FARC, the chiefs, the commanders, talking with me. We had lunch. We joked about things. We talked about, of course, politics, their agenda, our agenda. It was something that, when they captured me, I thought this is a mistake. whenever the commanders will know it's me, they will release me. But no, they really were meaning.
And they decided you were valuable, I guess.
They decided I was valuable. I think that at first they thought this is a coup, and we're going to be able to negotiate to get back to it, because that territory was important for them. So I think that perhaps they said, this is going to be our way to force the government to get back to the table, or perhaps they just thought what they said, which was, we're going to exchange her for prisoners that we have in the jails in Colombia, and we're going to trade her. But I think that after a while they decided it was better to just keep us. It was a better deal, because it gave them like an international media exposure.
Well, that raises some very interesting questions about the sort of politics of hostage taking and hostage release. We might come to those in a moment, but I think I should ask you first about who the FARC are.
Good question. I can tell about what I saw. It's a military organization. They have rules. They have, their inside laws. I didn't see much of political discussions, and I don't feel, nor the troop. There were young peasants that were recruited as FARC guerrillas, nor the commanders had really a true interest for politics. I thought that was something that they didn't like too much. They liked the military part of the struggle, but not to just think about. So it was kind of, for me it was kind of disappointing in a way, because they were, advertising themselves as revolutionaries.
An alternative government.
Alternative government, communist. And what I saw was a group that very hierarchic organization, but with privileges, which also was kind of, annoying, because they were supposed to just be communist, so share everything.
To be egalitarian. Yeah.
Egalitarian, and no, this was, you wanted to be a commander because this would give you access to better food, better clothes, toys, money, women, things that were. And the core of the thing is that I think that once they decided they were going to allow themselves to finance the organization through drugs, which it's what they do, I think they became a drug cartel, really. I mean, the mentality just changed. And I was impressed on how skillful they were. They knew about the job, and they were really into it. Wherever we would go, we were, just going through. We were, of course, marching into the jungle, but the points where we were making the transitions from one sector to the other were always coca fields. Always
coca fields.
Coca, all the time in the jungle.
So entirely drug financed.
Yes.
Yeah. And many of the guerrillas, your guards, were in fact children.
Yes, they were children. They were the youngest I remember I had as a guard was a boy that I think was 12, 13 at the most. And they were between, 14 and 18. That was the range of ages. So they were really adolescents.
Obviously, your treatment varied. I mean, you moved into several different camps. You're on the road a lot. You're, on the road, let's say, in the jungle, on foot, marching. And different places you were treated differently according to whose command you came under. But you also had very different guards, didn't you? I mean, with some guards you developed, not a friendship exactly, but I guess...
We could say it was kind of a friendship. I think that, we were in this situation where, in a way, they were the bad guys and we were the good guys, But
that's pretty clear, I think.
But truly, it was not really like this, because I could see good and bad over that side and good and bad over this side, you know. So I think it was for some of them, it was difficult to just accept or find a way to admit what they were doing. I mean, I saw conflict of conscience in some of them. Of course, they were brainwashed every day. They had this kind of councils or, you know, assemblies, and the commander would, you know, address them and would make sure that they were, you know, clear that what they were doing was okay. But it was, I don't think it was so obvious. And the other thing was that there was also a pattern of behavior. Those groups would change, you know, they would change guards and groups and commanders, probably because it was hard to be, I mean, 100% of the time with prisoners. It's challenging. Isolated in the jungle, less food, I mean. And whenever the group was like new, there was this kind of, they wanted to know about us, they asked questions and things, but very quickly there was this degradation of the relationship, and they could become really aggressive and humiliating. And there was this, then like, it was like the bad in them just, you know, came apparent because they were under pressure. There was the group pressure that was immense. They were told that they had to be rough on us because, of course, if any of us would escape, they could, you know, be executed. I mean, there was a lot of pressure.
And they were, I mean, with some you discussed. I mean, these were kids the same age as your children.
Yes, they were the same age as my children, and I always was thinking, what have, I mean, you know, life. I mean, my children could have been born in conditions where their choice was, I mean, to go to the guerrilla. And even if I knew that they were deeply good in them, how the situation could have turned them to be. I was always thinking about the horrible options these kids had to face in their lives.
Some of the girls, for example, because a lot of women guerrillas that would say, well, they had worked in a bar before that, and you knew what that meant, and that the FARC was preferable.
Yes, of course. I mean, between prostitution and, you know, being in an organization with a rifle, with uniform, feeling that they could make themselves respect in front of civilians because it was an option for them. And misery. Those were kids that would sometimes narrate to me situations of hunger. These guys could have, days without eating in the jungle because nothing was growing or they couldn't, that was the situation. Poverty, extreme poverty. So of course the FARC was an option because they would eat every day. Rice and beans, but every day.
Better than nothing.
Yes.
You talk about us, and of course you weren't alone as a hostage. And in fact, I guess in some ways, there's so much in your book, but one of the key strands in the book is about your relationship, the relationship between you and the other hostages. And at times, that was extremely difficult, wasn't it?
Yes, it was extremely difficult for all of us. For all of us. We were forced to live in a very small space, having to share everything with people we didn't know. And we didn't want to be there, none of us. And it was difficult. We were in a situation where our identity was denied. So all the conflicts that arises with those kind of, traumas. So I think it was, it was the best space to have all the bad come up in all of us. So all the bad was there, but all the good too, which was incredible. And that for me is what I just, try to bring up, because I saw incredible things of gestures and attitudes of solidarity and love and heroism, devotion. I mean, things that for me are, you see, I think that one of the things that was very important at that time was when I was thinking that someday I would be able to just get out of there. And I was thinking, the day this will happen, that I will be free, I need to be able to look at my face in a mirror and feel okay. The problem is the shame. When you are in situations where the choices that you have to make are so difficult, you have to be careful not to make the bad choice that could be the good choice in the moment, but could be the bad choice in perspective.
Like, as some of your fellow hostages did, currying favour with the guards, betraying fellow hostages in order to get an extra ration or something, some extra privileges, that sort of thing.
Yes, that sort of thing. And things also like, for example, I mean, I will always think of this because I think it marked me so much. It was the first night we were together in this horrible place. It was a concentration camp they had built in the middle of nowhere. I mean, barbed wires, fences, watchtowers. It was really a very horrible place. And the shock to just get there and have that door, huge metal door, just shutting behind you. And you're there, you're trapped, you're a prisoner, but you know that no, you're not a prisoner. You are kidnapped. And that was our first night, and we were all very, under the shock. And then in the morning, there was 2 guys came the other side of the fence and shouted, "Number yourselves." But, it was very scary. Everybody was like startled.
Number yourself as in count yourself off?
It was a roll call. Roll call, but I didn't understand at the beginning because it didn't make sense to me. And then I saw that the prisoner, the hostage that was near the fence, said 1, and then there was a second said 2, and so on and so forth. And when it came to me that I had listened to what they were doing, and every time they were giving a number, I was like feeling so bad. I was saying, no, we cannot accept this. So I said, Ingrid Betancourt. And then there was this, very aggressive attitude from the guards. And then I said, look, I tried to explain myself. And I said, if you want to know if I'm here, you just call me by my name and I will answer. But the thing that always struck me in this story is that, in a way, the guards just, they let the thing go. But after that, my companions were so aggressive against me, saying, who do you think you are? You think you are like a diva because people talk about you in the radio? You think that you cannot give them a number? You think that you're better than us? And it was difficult for me to explain to them why it was so crucial not to accept to be. And you know what? I remember when I reacted, thinking about the numbers they would put on the skin
of the Jews in Nazi Germany. Yeah,
yes. So it was for me it was very strong. And that's what I mean. There are moments where you have to make a choice, and you know that the choice is not going to be the good one in the moment, because of course then the retaliation, everybody was scared that they would punish us. It was a deal. But for me it was like, okay, I did what I needed to do.
Well, and you were defiant throughout in ways that often your fellow hostages resented. but also incredibly brave. I mean, you tried to escape 5 times. And at one point, I suppose the most dramatic and the couple that were almost successful, you actually used the river, didn't you, to try and escape? Just explain how you thought. I mean, you spent ages planning this and preparing for it. Explain how you tried to escape.
And I became so good at it that I trained one of my companions, and he succeeded in escaping. It was amazing. Well, the thing was that, of course, every time I was recaptured, I had this horrible feeling of depression, and it was really physical. And I would think to just hold together, I would think it doesn't matter. I'm in a learning process. I have to learn how to survive in this jungle, and next time I will succeed. So it's true that every time I was, getting better at the job. So for me, one of the things that I realized is that the longer we were in the jungle, the deeper they would move us into. So after 3 years in the jungle, we knew we could not get to civilization the next day or after a week. I mean, it was, if we were lucky, it could mean a month or 3 months. So what I thought was that if we could go to the river and let ourselves take by the current, that would have the advantage of not leaving traces anywhere. The speed would, of course, just help us in getting away, because it was easier to be in the water than to try to walk in the jungle because of the vegetation that is so dense. And that because of course the river is like a highway in the jungle. Somewhere in that river we would find civilians. That was my bet. So we prepared everything. I remember, in secret, sewing backpacks with whatever we had, with the boots of our pants or whatever, to be able to bring things with us. And what we would bring was a little thing to eat for the first days. It was all a strategy to be able to get hold of fish hooks and
fishing line.
Yes, and everything was calculated in that sense. For example, I remember I thought that we needed flotation devices. So the only thing that I thought was they had this where they would bring the oil.
For cooking.
Yeah. And
oil drums. Yeah.
The drums. And so once they were empty, they would throw it away, or we would ask them so that we could carry water to the camp and save water, because we were always camping not too near to the river to wash our hands or our teeth or whatever. And then that was the flotation device.
So you use these to jump into the river and
float.
You and one of your colleagues did this for several days before you're eventually. It's a gripping story.
Yes.
I want to come back before we'll go in a moment to some questions from the audience, but a couple of things I wanted to touch on before we did that. One was your relationship to the jungle, because the jungle in many ways was your captor as well as the FARC, and your tormentor in terms of bugs, insects, dangerous animals, diseases, malaria, leishmaniasis, other terrible diseases. But you also managed to find beauty and solace in the jungle.
Yes, I think that the relationship with the jungle is a lot like the relationship with everybody. It's like it was the contrast. I mean, it was never black and white. It was like with the guards, some were nice, the others were horrible, or they would, same with my companions. Some were nice, others were more difficult, etc. And the jungle, I had this impression that I was trapped in this nature, that it was so impossible to get out. And it was the jungle was aggressive to me because everything was painful in the jungle. For example, I don't remember a day of my captivity without scratching myself. I was always itching, always. I had bugs in the... It was always a problem. But sometimes the jungle became a protector, especially when we were escaping. I mean, it was the jungle that was preserving us from being caught again. And for example, the river, of course, when we would escape in the river, we had to do it at night. So at night, a river is like very black, and you have in your head all the things that are in the river. The piranhas, the anacondas, the crocodiles. And I want to tell you that, and ladies, you will understand that when I was escaping, one of my, concerns was not to be in the D-Day, because I didn't want to have the piranhas. You understand? Okay. So those kind of things were kind of tricky. I mean, to just, So the jungle was for me an ally in some moments, and then it was an enemy in some others. But with time, I also discovered that there was in the jungle that I hated at the beginning, because I was a city girl. I didn't feel that was the place for me. I ended up by feeling like a connection with nature that soothed my pain, and that gave me a pace and sometimes a rhythm to my thoughts, and some kind of harmony and peace that for me were essential to just not turn into a crazy person. Because one of the things that I saw around me were behaviors that were linked with schizophrenia around the persons that were in captivity with me. We were always, you could see the verge of the nervous breakdown. There was always this very tiny limit. And I think that the jungle, for me, just helped me.
I should point out, just going back to the piranhas, that the piranhas didn't eat you. You ate the piranhas.
Yes, that's true.
Raw.
Yes. Well, when I could fish in that, it was funny because I was with this guy, my friend that I adore, Lucho, and he was a diabetic, and we decided that we needed to run away and to escape. So once we did it, and I will go, he was an incredible human being. So we were there, and I was catching fish. And miraculously, we caught lots of fish. So it was like, wow, we're going to survive. We're going to make it. If we catch all those fishes in one day, we can be living here, And then we couldn't light a fire. We did everything, and I was thinking, you didn't learn how to light a fire, Lucho? And he would say, I suppose you had learned. And we were like, we couldn't do it.
All that planning.
And we didn't learn how to do this. So I remember he said, no, I'm not going to eat this. And I was thinking, he's diabetic, he needs to eat, because then we're going to be in problem. If he comes into a coma, in a diabetic coma. So I just cut the fish the best I could, and I presented to him like in a leaf. And I said, look, Lucho, this is delicious. These are sushis. And I remember him looking at me like, I was like, it's so good. And finally, he managed to eat them. Yeah.
There's a couple of microphones, one for our audience upstairs and one in the middle here, which someone's just going to put in place. And so if you'd like to ask a question, I'd ask you to go to the microphone. I'm just going to ask Ingrid one more. And this comes back to something we touched on earlier, the politics of hostage-taking and hostage release. Because on the one hand, it was in the interest of the Colombian government to forget about you. Because if there was no fuss about you, your value as a hostage declined. And therefore, they might have been more able to do a deal with FARC to exchange you, or you stop being a problem, I guess, for everyone. But on the other hand, the government of France, your family, your friends campaigning kept your name in the media, kept the issue alive after all these years, and in a sense that played into the hands of FARC because that increased your value to them. So there's a real dilemma here, isn't there?
Not for me.
No?
No, not for me. Not for me. I want to tell you that from all the group we were, at what point we were 68, 2 soldiers succeeded to escape, and they were recaptured, like I was recaptured, and they were executed, and I wasn't. So for me, the being alive in the thought of others, having people all around the world campaigning for release, I mean, it was my. I'm alive because of people that were backing me up. Now, the other thing is thinking that governments will negotiate when the value of the people will be less important, and that's not true. Governments negotiate for their interests, their personal interests. They never think about the lives of others. 20 of my fellow hostages are today still in captivity. Nobody knows their names. They don't interest anyone. And if that was the logic, they should be out, because those guys have been there for 12 years. 12 years. They were there before I was abducted, and they're still there now. And they are not, excuse me because this is horrible to say, but like important. And it's so, and it's very sad for all of us, because you see, once the big bunch of us came to be free, once the FARC freed some of us with the help of Hugo Chavez. That was the negotiation prior to to the military operation that freed me and my companions. And once that bunch was out, I think that people thought, okay, that's done. I mean, our job is over. And there's no, I don't think there is a pressure for the government to just have them out, or for the FARC. The FARC, they are drug traffickers. They can have those guys forever in the jungle. They can feed them. They can feed the people. Excuse me. To guard them, and they feel that they are. It's like a disguise to pretend they have a political drive. That's not true. I mean, what is the purpose of having people 12 years in the jungle without no negotiation?
Okay, we'll take a question from the top, first of all. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm interested to know what sustained you during your captivity.
Love. Love is the answer, always. And I'm going to tell you this in a very basic way. I was surrounded by people that hated me. And when people hate you in a daily basis, your identity is shaken to the point that you think perhaps I'm not worthy of being loved. And if you think that, you're in problem, because then you're going to begin giving up on yourself. And then you enter to identity crisis that can lead to the loss of your dignity. And when you lose dignity as a human being, you lost who you are. You lose yourself as a human being. So for me, in those moments of despair, I would go back in my head, and I would just focus on those incredible moments of love that I received from my parents, of love with my children. And that kept me together. My mother, during those 6.5 years, sent messages through the radio. There are programs in Colombia that broadcast messages from the families of the hostages without knowing if those messages are going to be heard by the hostages. And she did it on a daily basis, every day. That was crucial for me, because it was the only way I could remind myself who I was, through her love. So we need love. I mean, that's the only thing I can tell you. I mean, we need love. We need to give love. We need to receive love. That's our...
I just want to follow up with a couple of other things. I mean, those radio messages are an incredibly important part, obviously, of the book. But there's two other things I'd ask you about in relation to what sustained you. And one would be faith, because sometimes you had access to a Bible, and I think that was important to you. And the other was occupying yourself to defeat what you call the poison of boredom.
Yes. Well, faith is the greatest version of love. So it's just, you know, this very powerful tool that we have in ourselves to just have the certainty that we are loved from this, you know, however you want to call what I called God. And so that you're not in a chaos situation. There's a purpose, there's a meaning, there's whatever problem you encounter in life, and we all do. We all have difficult moments. We all have difficult decisions to make. We all have... if we think that whatever we are confronting is an opportunity to grow, to learn something about ourselves, to amend, to transform, to just get to be a better person, then things fall into place, and you can confront things in a very positive way. Now, the problem of boredom was that it was the way for depression. So we had to keep our minds busy. And in a place where there's nothing to do, it's kind of difficult. So what we did, and for me that was essential, was to build up a schedule every day. From 9 a.m. to 11, I will be working out. So that was like devoted to that. Then from 3 to 4, I will be reading, and from 6 to 9, I will be listening to the radio. And even though there was not so much to do, the idea that I could just like fragment the days into pieces, that gave me the sensation that I could just face what was truly the torture of being captured, which was not knowing when this would end, like the eternity of captivity in front of me.
Okay, question from the...
Hola, Beatriz. I've got two questions. One of them is, how would you keep record on the days that you kept kidnapped? And the other one was, if you had the chance to change anything or make another decision to avoid the situation that you were into, whether you change or not.
So the first part of that question is, you've written this book. How did you keep a record of what happened to you, or how did you recall the events?
We had radios, so we could have a record of the day. But of course, for me, what helped me in reconstructing everything that I remembered was through milestones that I kept during all those years. Those milestones were the birthday of my children. Those days, I always wanted to make it different, in a way that I would remember where I was, what I was thinking, and what I was doing in the day. Melanie turned to be 17, then 18, then 19, then 20, then 21, then 22. And I can remember exactly, for each of her birthday, where I was. The same for Lorenzo. Then I had the Christmas and New Year's Eve. And with Christmas, what happened is that the change of camp helped me in just knowing what Christmas it was, because we never had a Christmas like the previous one, even though there was this kind of decision taken by the FARC not to celebrate Christmas because it was a religious date. So Christmas was nothing. To
counter-revolutionary.
Very, yes.
I'll take another question. Yeah.
Sorry. Hello. I just finished your book, and I really liked it. But I have just one question about it. I really love all the ideas that you had, like with fear, with angry, with all that things that humans feel. And then what I don't understand is why then you sue Colombia. And it's just a question, it's not why do you sue Colombia and then you withdraw?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I really thank you for that. Well, this is very Colombian things. We're going to be a little bit into home politics. In Colombia, there is a law that was enacted before we were freed. That was enacted to protect the victims of terrorism, because of course Colombia is dealing with lots of terrorism. And that law stipulated that victims of terrorism could come to the government and ask for compensation. And this is done in a very, like a table where if you have the number of days, the people that were involved, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 children, your father, your mother, etc. And this gives like a table of how much you could be compensated by the government. My fellow hostages that were abducted at the same time as me or before me presented their compensation claim, and nobody talked about it. But when I presented mine, the government of Colombia did a huge scandal about it. The first thing they said was that I was suing the soldiers that had liberated me. The second thing they said was that I wanted to get rich with my abduction. So it has been a little difficult for me to swallow this, because it was a law that was available for all of us. Other of my fellow hostages after me had presented their claim, and nothing has been said. I think there was something going on that has nothing to do with the defamation that took place, which is that at that time I was very high in the polls. And I think that some politicians in Colombia were kind of nervous. That is my explanation. Perhaps I'm wrong, but it's the only way I can figure out why the Vice President of Colombia said what he said, making this huge scandal about something that was a right of a victim to do. I was treated like a criminal. I mean, I want to tell you that in Colombia we have had huge criminals. Pablo Escobar is not the worst of them. We have had people that have slaughtered thousands of peasants with mass graves that have been opened to the public, and this has been going on and on for years. None of them had been insulted like I was. So, what to make about this? First, well, money is not an issue. That's why I just withdraw the claim for compensation, because, I mean, I'm free. You know, for me, freedom and being with my children and with my mother is my blessing. I'm grateful for that. I withdraw my claim because also the answer was clear. I mean, I was coming to the state of Colombia as a victim, to just be acknowledged as a victim. And my response was that I was a criminal. I don't need any compensation. My answer is there. I mean, the Colombian society is hard. And the values they convey are not the values I cherish and I defend. Well, it has been very traumatic for my family and for me, very unjust. I hope we will change, that the hearts of Colombian people will change, and that we will have more compassion, and we will be able to just, be able to just feel the pain of others. Now, this story, I have to link it with another one, which I think it's important, especially to answer completely your question. One of the issues that was brought up was the idea, once I was abducted, and the Colombian government at the time, which was not the same as the one that liberated me, but the other one, the previous one, once I was abducted, because they had withdrawn my security and were nervous of the consequences of this decision, they just said that I was responsible for my abduction, that I was warned that this was a dangerous place, and that I was asked not to go where I was going, and that I did it because I wanted to have a higher score in the polls. So after 6 years, that thing, it didn't make sense.
The election was over by then, I think.
Come on, But once I presented the claim, they just brought this up again. And they said, how dare she ask for compensation when she wanted to be abducted?
Okay, we'll have one more question.
Hi, Ingrid. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm from Colombia, and I guess that as all the Colombians, they want peace, and they wanted to have it without killing each other. However, I just keep thinking how the guerrilla will stop to do what they are doing if they have the business, if you can call it business, that give more money, guns, kidnap, and drugs. You were there for 6.5 years. I get that you hear what they talk, how they think, and what they believe. Do you think that is something that can make them go and have conversation with the government for peace?
That's the question. This government that we have today in Colombia is a new government. The president's name is Juan Manuel Santos, and the first thing he did when he came into office was proposing to the FARC to come back to the negotiation table and begin again a peace process. No answer from the FARC. So, why do they reject negotiation? Two options. They don't have anything to negotiate because their aim is not to have a political agenda with things that they could, fight for, but they are just protecting their way of life, which is lots of money, lots of arms, power in some territories, and that's a better living for them than to just, get back to civil, normal life. Or they are divided inside of the organization, and they don't want to negotiate because there's not a voice and there's not a unifying structure that will, prevent them in a negotiation process not to just explode internally. In those two cases, I don't think we have left many choices. Because if they don't want to negotiate because they are a drug cartel and they don't have a political drive anymore, or if they don't want to negotiate because they cannot, there is not a commander that has the sufficient authority to just pull everybody together and make them obey the decision of negotiation. In those two cases, I'm afraid that the only solution we have left is to confront them with military forces. And this is so sad, because I don't believe in, I mean, you see, the problem is that behind the no negotiation is, let's dream for a moment that we're going to defeat the FARC and we just wipe out the FARC from the face of Colombia. The problem is that the problem will remain. We have 6 million displaced people in Colombia. We have a horrible war, economic war going on, which is this kind of business of the warlords to just steal the land from the peasants in Colombia. And this has been going on since Bolivar. I mean, people of Colombia, very humble people, trying to make a living, and they just go to the jungle, what we call the agriculture frontier, and they just cut some trees and make the land usable. And once it's made usable, and perhaps they have the chance of having a little road or something getting into their parcel, then the warlords come, they, under threat, oblige them to leave, and because of corruption, that land is, the deed is transferred to one of the big corrupt warlords that we have in Colombia. So this is a huge problem.
So even if you defeated the FARC, the conditions would create another FARC?
If we don't change the way we are, because this is a problem of greed. In Colombia, we never, like today, we have had this amount of concentration of land in so small amount of hands. There are, I don't know how many, but very few families in Colombia are the owners of millions of hectares of land. This is the greed.
I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions. I'd like to thank you in the audience for attending, and please join me in thanking Ingrid Betancourt.